Our story begins in a desolate, cursed place. Reddit.com. I've seen a lot of people waiting for the next game in the Fire Emblem series, Fortune's Weave, and look, I'm excited too, but some folks are losing their minds just a little too hard in my opinion. And even still, let's acknowledge it requires a Switch too, and as it stands, getting one of these would be mutually exclusive with paying my medical bills, and I doubt I'm the only one in that position. So unless I get into some morally dubious activity, I'm just kind of out of luck in that regard. But there are tons of other games that can fill that same strategy game-shaped hole in your heart, and today I want to go through some that might do it for you. Now, just to preface, strategy is a big genre, but I'm focusing on the tactics subgenre, games similar to Fire Emblem. No real-time strategy like StarCraft or grand strategy like Total War. And also, this is the big one, I'm trying to focus on games you might not have heard of or tried even if you're pretty deep in the genre. Like any strategy game buff has heard of XCOM and Final Fantasy Tactics or Triangle Strategy or SteamWorld Heist. Yes, SteamWorld Heist 2 is better than the first one in every regard and it's really good and you should absolutely go play it, but also, like, yeah, you know what SteamWorld Heist is. I want us to talk about random weird games. The type of thing where you end up finding the game you never knew you wanted. I'm not going in depth in any of them, just gonna cover them very briefly so I can cover as much ground as I can, and I'd encourage you to write down any of them that pique your interest so you can check it out later. Also, look, I'm just gonna level with you. The footage for this video, a lot of it is just gonna be trailers for the games I'm talking about. You might think that's lazy, but I prefer to think of it as the path of least resistance during a time where I frankly have other shit I need to be doing. If all that sounds interesting, then follow me into the wilderness, and don't worry about any suspiciously placed pitfalls that might be here and there. Let's start by talking about the more popular indie games that have made their rounds over the years. Dedicated Fire Emblem fans have probably heard of them and even played them, but I still want to shout them out anyways. One of my big personal favorites is Dark Deity 2. I like the writing of the story. The build crafting has just enough limits to make each character feel unique, but being just open enough so it has a lot of customization. It has great art direction and voice acting, and a number of people who worked on it originally came from the fan game and ROM hacking scene, which is super awesome. There's a few issues here and there, like some balance weirdness, aspects of the presentation can be iffy, there's a scene or two I wasn't huge on, but I was still really impressed by like 95% of the game, so I didn't care that much about the occasional misstep. It is generally considered as much better than the first game by both players and developers alike. I don't think they've announced a sequel yet, but also they straight up said the story isn't over, so like, there's definitely a sequel coming. Another one I like is Those Who Rule, that has a much darker tone, and the combat is much more dangerous to fit that tone. You can have a shield to give you an extra buffer of protection each turn, or lean into the lethality with dangerous two-handed weapons. The production value is generally not as high as Dark Deity 2, but unless you're the type of person who cares about how fast the water dries in Crimson Desert, or the size of your horse's junk in Red Dead 2, that probably won't be a deal breaker for you. This game also has a sequel in development that I will most certainly get. Astral Throne is a roguelike, but other than that, it has the same general systems as Fire Emblem. You know, the magic strength split, the speed stat, different movement types, the whole shebang. So if you are just hungry for roguelikes, this is an option for you. I wasn't a huge fan of it personally. I think I'm just getting tired of that subgenre. But there's been a lot of updates since launch that I haven't checked out, and more notably, this one also has a sequel on the way. That in particular looks like it'll deal with a lot of the issues I had with the first one, so at the very least keep an eye on that. The last one I want to mention is Symphony of War: The Nephilim Saga, which I sort of liked. I have mixed feelings on it. But the gameplay consists a lot of building a bunch of different squads and leveling them and making them unique. It's kind of like Unicorn Overlord in that sense. If you like that game, definitely get Symphony of War. It's not exactly like Fire Emblem, but it works similarly enough. I never finished it and I don't remember it very clearly because it's been years, but it's an option at your disposal. See, those are some cool games, right? I got some more. Just keep walking forward. Onto that mat. Stop right there. Perfect. I've trapped you! Welcome to my gay and stupid maze! We're talking about Romhacks now! If you want a fresh original Fire Emblem experience, not like all the stuff you've already played from the series, Romhacks are the best place to go. And there is a huge variety of games for you to choose from, easy or hard, long or short, something close to the official games, or if you literally just want to play Minesweeper in the Engine of Sacred Stones. But we can go over the more traditional ones to start. The Last Promise by Blazer was the first custom campaign, revolutionary for the hacking scene, though it definitely definitely shows its age in my opinion. Vision Quest by Pandan is another one that's well regarded, and if you really don't know what you're looking for, I'd say it's probably the best starting point. The newer Dream of Five is another option, standing out for its high quality writing from Parrhesia and gorgeous visuals by Luminescent Blade, but then there's stuff that goes a little further from the standard series fare. The Four Kings by Crash Boom Bang gives every unit a personal weapon with unique effects in order to give all of them unique roles. It turns it into a sort of a puzzle game with a very different flow from standard Fire Emblem. Of the pre-2020 big foundational hacks, this is probably the most unique and is still among my favorites. More recently than that though, the Mara's Golden Country by Retina is a very popular one that has a lot of custom code in it that allows for unique mechanical effects, items, abilities, and fans who have really fallen in love with the cast of characters. I have never seen any other ROM hack get so much fan art. Cerulean Crescent by Rivian revolves around many characters having abilities that refresh their turn, so if you play well, you can have these big chains where units get tons of turns in a row for these massive, insane player phases. Honestly, it probably has the biggest potential for huge dopamine hits out of maybe any game I've ever played. Hag in White by Saint Rubenio has the gimmick of only giving you a single healer and the rest of the game being designed around that. And also getting tons and tons of discussion around the story, to the point where if a ROM hacking Discord server has like walls and walls of spoiler text, everyone's like, oh, you're talking about Hag in White again, got it. If you're a fan of Radiant Dawn, then you might like Dark Amulet and its sequel Shadow of Dawn by Vorgus, which features a story of political intrigue, units becoming available and unavailable as the story goes on, and the sequel even flipping back and forth between two groups. There have even been attempts to remake other games in the series within the GBA engine, such as Sacred Echoes being a remake of Shadows of Valentia that tries to fix some of the issues with that game while also keeping what fans of it really love. I haven't tried it myself, but it definitely looks more fun than the original Shadows of Valentia. Then again, that bar isn't particularly high. All of that is just the mainstream stuff. Well, as mainstream as a ROM hack for a strategy series of inconsistent popularity can be. Then there's stuff like Poke Emblem by Vesli, which is pretty much just Gen 1 Pokemon, but now it's using Fire Emblem mechanics. Vesli is one of many coding wizards within the ROM hacking scene that helps other people with stuff, and so while I can't give all of them a shout out, I at least want to throw one his way. Storage by Epicer starts with the phase where you spend a limited amount of money on mercenaries and gear, which determines what units and equipment you have at your disposal for a shorter 5-chapter game, and it has a lot of potential for replaying it with different setups and combos. Iron Emblem by Relic gives you a team of weak generics and encourages you to play without resetting for any deaths, and even encourages you to have some of them take dangerous suicide rushes sometimes. Fire Emblem is normally played in a way where you are really encouraged to keep everyone alive, so this is a really unique framing device where it's like, it's kind of okay to just kind of throw somebody to the wind and let them get eaten by the wolves. Lord of the Seas by Captain Fisting. Yeah, I know. Is a hack with a focus on naval combat and weaving it in seamlessly with the infantry battles. And I haven't played it myself, but based on the positive reception and the footage I've seen, it appears to be the most successful attempt at this so far. And Code of the Burger King by Retina, it's a joke hack, but has still well-respected gameplay, so people enjoy playing it outside of the jokes and the writing. And of course, there are contests in the community to make one-chapter hacks sometimes, the most notable ones being the series named after the protagonists of the games, Marth, Celica, Sigurd, and now Leaf. I did a video that was about the first two. I was gonna make one about Sigurd, and then I just kind of didn't. Maybe now though I could go back and cover the previous two in combination. There's a lot of funny ones in here, like Minesweeper, Where's Waldo, Survival Horror, Blackjack. There's a lot of creativity here. And it'd be a crime if I didn't bring up Ava Tur, Ace Attorney, an Ace Attorney case in the Sacred Stones engine that was super fun and legitimately kind of made me tear up by the end. But there's also more traditional, fun chapters and well-told stories. From entries like Closing Act, Lonely River, Untitled Costco Project, The Spell Thieves, and Pillars of the Horizon that are 100% worth going out of your way to play. And even outside of those few favorites of mine, there's still plenty else worth checking out, like The Last Refuge and Ruins of Lost Ambition. I'd encourage you to go looking for yourself if you're interested. All this, of course, was saving my personal favorite ROM hacks for last. Curse of Lagdo by Doing Things, Darkstone by Saint Rubenio, and Blessed Heart by Shark3143. Curse of Lagdo is probably the most unique of these three gameplay-wise, with a brand new critical hit system with flanking and funky skills and cool map twists. But the thing that really completes it for me is the story that I loved so much, the ending made me weep like a little baby. Hell, I liked it so much, I composed a bunch of original songs for the game. That's not a joke, I just volunteered for that shit. Darkstone is a must-play for big fans of Sacred Stones. It delves a lot into the complicated and sometimes seemingly contradictory character of Leon, while giving all of these various villains of FE8 time to shine, remixing the old maps and finding ways to make new scenarios out of them. Blessed Heart doesn't do anything crazy innovative, I just find it comfy. It feels a lot like Sacred Stones and I really like that. It's not perfect, but it's nice. I enjoy it. That's not a crime. Go ahead, try to take me to court over it. Now you may have noticed that all of these are based on the Game Boy Advance Fire Emblem games, and that is where the community has poured the most effort and resources into, but there are some major projects for the other games in the series. The Gay Fates mod is maybe the most famous one, with tons and tons of extra supports, added gay romantic pairings within those supports, and changing some of the more poorly written ones from the original game. I'd really recommend it if you want to play Fates. Some Tellius projects are picking up wind, like 4 Riders being a full custom campaign in the Path of Radiance engine, and Daybreak being a huge rework and expansion of Radiant Dawn. Even Thracia 776 is getting some love here and there, with projects like New Theory of Thracia reworking the game, and Emblem Chronicle 7 trying to rebuild the campaign of Blazing Sword within the engine of Thracia. There is at least something for, I'm pretty sure, every game in the series. There's tons and tons of others you can find on FE Universe, Serena's Forest, and probably some other websites if you're looking too. It is really worth giving some more love and attention to these real works of art that so many work hours go into. There are so many potential options out there. There's a few links in the description to help you direct some big lists of them. Lastly, if anybody in the comments tries to recommend those 2 hacks directed by a well-known sex pest in the community, don't. I'll end your whole career. You can cry 1984 all you want, but a small amount of people in this world deserve to be forgotten. And with that, let's move on with our lives. Up next, I want to list off some games that are definitely a different style from Fire Emblem. Like, these are not FE likes, so to speak, and so they might not be for you, but for me, they scratch the same type of strategy game itch, so I thought it would be relevant to recommend them here anyways. Chroma Squad is a strategy game where your characters are stunt actors in a Power Rangers show, and the episodes of the show are the levels in the game. It's pretty easy, it's not all that complicated, but it's a fun little game to chill out with and make some fun character builds. The writing is like a little bad, but it's bad in the way that a Power Rangers episode would be, so I think it's actually perfect. And the soundtrack still plays in my head sometimes. Fun fact, my outro music is not from this game, but from another game from this studio, Galaxy of Pen and Paper. This is an old favorite of mine. It's in my top 100 games. Easy for me to recommend. Wildermyth is for the tabletop fans out there. It stands out for its procedurally generated narrative system, meaning it has a bunch of puzzle pieces already handmade, and they can come together in a lot of different ways. I had my issues with the storytelling system, but what really stood out to me was the tactics gameplay, specifically how magic works, and how the spells the mages can use depend on the objects around them in the environment. A stone, a campfire, a tree, they have to link their magic to these objects, and then the objects become the focal point for the spell. Part of me kind of wishes they took this concept and made a game that was focusing in on just this part of the tactics aspect, as opposed to the overarching narrative design part. Still, it's not a bad pick, and it has co-op, which means it's always a fun time with friends. Kind of like D&D, but if nobody wants to be the GM or do the prep work, this is like kind of a thing you can do. A game with a very different vibe, but reminiscent tactics is Other Side, the closest thing I can find to a strategy horror game. You have 3 units on the field and you have tools that let you very cleanly wipe out lots of enemies if you play smart, but losing health is dangerous and costly, which makes every turn tense and high stakes. It is a roguelike, but there is an easier than standard difficulty, which isn't the intended experience, but I prefer to play on anyways because roguelikes drive me up the wall. This is another personal favorite of mine, also in my top 100. Highly recommended. Horizon's Gate has very similar combat systems to Fire Emblem, but has less focus on those combat systems and more on exploration, a big open world to navigate, and building up a crew for your pirate fleet. I think I enjoy exploration just as a game concept less than most people, but I know I'm kind of in the minority there. So if you want a weird mix of Fire Emblem and open world pirate game, this is kind of what you're looking for. War Tales is a game I had fun with that also falls under the mercenary band management game category, similar to the Mount and Blade series, but with turn-based tactics battles instead of the big army-sized action set pieces. It has a pretty interesting world, very dark and brutal, but in a way that gives you room to explore the different factions, how they handle the various problems. They give you branching choices for what you do in the various quest lines. I like it quite a lot. I do think it's very grindy, but I was enjoying the base gameplay so much I didn't really care that much until I had put in dozens of hours, and like, by that point I had gotten my money's worth in how much fun I was having. So, you know, it's a good game. Speaking of mercenary band management games, a very recent release is Nitro Gen Omega, and yeah, it's a little content sparse, the UI isn't amazing, it has a few other miscellaneous problems, but I got so hooked by it anyways that it single-handedly delayed the release of this video by at least a day. The third and final roguelike on this little section, I have to shout out Anomaly Collapse. With a strategy system that takes place on a one-dimensional grid, a lot of importance on allies working together with the co-op attack system, pushing enemies away from you into obstacles into the edge of the grid, and using the items you get to build around different methods of dealing damage, applying buffs or debuffs, expanding your options. This is maybe my favorite roguelike. A sort of niche indie game I fell in love with recently is Last Train Home, a dramatization of the real story of the Czechoslovakian Legion and their dangerous journey home by train after World War I. It goes back and forth between management sections where you gather resources along the way, upgrade your train, keep your soldiers healthy, and then the battle segments where you navigate your soldiers from engagement to engagement using cover and their abilities to keep them alive. Again, this is really not like Fire Emblem, but it filled the same need for a strategy game for me. If you've been looking for something that gives a similar vibe to This War of Mine, though is maybe a little less emotionally, like, heart-wrenching, like you don't want to have to stab an old man in his home, then this is right up your alley. Another one in my top 100, super highly recommended. Normally, I would not compare Fire Emblem to Shadow Tactics Blades of the Shogun, since Shadow Tactics plays more like a puzzle anyways. You try something, you mess up, reload a save, try something else. It's also a real-time strategy with pause game, so this sort of breaks my rules, but I put it here because you have a distinct crew of 5 characters, all with unique abilities and personalities, their own impact on where the story goes. They have fun little intertwining dynamics between them. So I'm a big enough fan of this game to put it on this list anyways. And lastly, look, this game you've probably heard of, but I want to include it anyways. The Divinity Original Sin games I love for the environmental effects. You can have one party member put oil on the ground and then have the next set it on fire, or put water puddles on the ground and electrocute it, but the enemies can do the same for you. And there's all sort of just objects in the environment that cause different effects too. I don't think these games are as well written as Baldur's Gate 3, they don't have as good of quest design, and the way they handle companions is a little iffier, but you can tell from the really good encounter design and fun set of spells that it is definitely the same studio. As soon as I heard Larian was making Baldur's Gate 3, I was like, it's gonna be a banger, and people agreed it was a banger. Yeah, both of these games are worth playing, 100%. Okay, we're gonna rapid fire a few different categories, so buckle up, we're gonna go blazing speed. Games I can barely remember. Felseal Arbiter's Mark is more like an indie version of Tactics Ogre, but it's still kinda cool. Mutant Year Zero is kinda like XCOM. Hard West 1 and 2 is also like XCOM, so if you like that style of gameplay, they have the same thing, but a different setting and tone. War Banners is a hex-based game that I think has some mercenary management stuff. Templar Battle Force is a top-down game with permadeath where dangerous enemies hide in the darkness, crazy skill trees, and equipment customization. I honestly remember it being sick as hell. Next section, a handful of games I actually wouldn't recommend personally. As much as I like being positive on games, these few I just really did not have fun with. Shard Punk. Imagine roguelike XCOM, but legitimately 50% of each level is completely empty, and the roguelike part adds nothing of value at the cost of decreasing the depth. There's a sequel in production, so I hope that'll fix some of my problems with it. Battle Brothers, I would describe this as evil war tales. The combat systems have less going on, the low hit chances make it agonizing to sit through in the late game, and the world is also dark, but in a way that makes it seem like it's trying too hard to be dark and not because it's trying to say something. Marvelous Midnight Suns. I had a friend describe this to me as, give me a grid-based tactics game, but hold the grid and hold the tactics. And yes, I would 100% describe Midnight Suns as that. Mordheim City of the Damned, I haven't played it in years, but this one I remember being way too punishing for a game that auto-saves, to the point where if one of your units gets particularly too badly injured, then you might as well just like say goodbye to them because they're not going to be useful anymore. Next, games I haven't played myself and have only heard about, but I've heard good things about. Wargroove is a spiritual successor to the Advance War games on the GBA, which has much less of a focus on long-term progression, since all the missions are separated out, and more on generating generic soldiers to throw into harm's way, rather than having distinct characters you're trying to keep safe for a very long time. If you liked Advance Wars, and you haven't played Wargroove yet, I'm shocked, honestly. Jagged Alliance is much more of a modern setting, and it's less like a traditional strategy game and more like a simulation, but it's still turn-based and has a lot of strategy elements to it. Tactical Breach Wizards is one of those SWAT team strategy games like Door Kickers or Breach and Clear, except you're also a wizard, and you have cool wizard powers. And this is from the devs of one of my favorite indie games ever, Gunpoint. 100 Line Defense Academy supposedly scratches a similar itch. I know like barely anything about it, but I just heard good things. Menace is a new game from the developers of Battle Brothers. I'm very interested to see if this game avoids those same issues I had. You answer distress calls from across the star system while managing your team of agents, so I wonder if it's in the similar mercenary management type zone or not. Lastly, there's multiple indie games that aren't out yet but are coming in the future I'm really excited about. Years of Division looks to be a really interesting spin on traditional Fire Emblem mechanics. I made a whole video about it. It's like 25 minutes long. You can go watch it. Stratagem Lost is in a similar boat, as well as having a really cool visual style that I haven't seen anything else quite replicate. I backed the Kickstarter, so I have access to the alpha, but I haven't gotten to it yet. It's on the list. I'm sorry. Diorama Break is one that, as I'm recording this, the Kickstarter is still up and is about halfway funded. It's aiming for a 2029 release that has a really unique system that blends strategy games with fighting game concepts. Again, I explain it better in my video. It's a shorter video, it's like 6 minutes, but even still, you should check that one out too. Kickstarter also recently started for Sovereign Eternal Legend. I threw some money its way and I'd encourage you to go give it a look yourself as well. And the last game I want to shout out, this is not an indie game at all, and you probably already know about it, but I'm really excited for Star Wars Zero Company, a bunch of former XCOM devs making a Star Wars strategy game where you manage a mercenary group in the Clone Wars with companions that have distinct characterization and motivations. I love Star Wars, I love strategy, I love mercenary management, I love having distinct companions. This is like my game. This is one of my most anticipated games of the year. And after all those games I listed, I'd like you to keep in mind, there's probably a lot of great strategy games that I missed. If you have more in mind that I didn't talk about, I would encourage you to mention them in the comments and why you enjoy it, or if you have more thoughts on any of the ones I did talk about. And so with all that said, it should be plenty clear to you by now that there's tons and tons of options out there, many of them made by small creators. Not all of them are exactly like Fire Emblem, but share a lot of similarities, and you shouldn't be afraid to broaden your horizons a little bit, as opposed to going feral and frothing at the mouth over this one specific thing that hasn't released yet. We don't need the same frenzy people had over Silksong or Elden Ring. Or you can choose to be obnoxious, and you know what? The fact that you have the freedom to choose this is one of the most mystifying things about our world.